I'm excited to share with you today a little bit about the things that we're thinking about in Galter, and also hope to inspire conversations today and in the days and weeks to come about ways that libraries can begin to plug in to some of these activities happening on their campuses. So this is a screenshot from the dedication address of the Archibald Church Library from the 1930s, which is the Galter Library of today. And when Dean Cutter was giving his address, he said, "The heart of this, as of any institution of higher learning, is its library." And I think that that rings true today. And it also helps us to be able to position ourselves in how we see ourselves on campus, which is truly at that intersection of everything happening. It really is that traditional kind of hub and spoke model. And it can be used to help guide the way that we approach our service models, our staffing decisions, our organizational structure. And so here are some of the things that we're thinking about at Galter. But they're topics that are not much different than what are being done in libraries around the world. So I think we, along with most other libraries, we're just trying to do the best we can. And we're trying to look for opportunities that exist on our campus that really do reflect the priorities and the objectives of our campus at that time. So I think the biggest message, if you can ignore everything else I say today, the biggest message that I'd like to communicate is that collaboration is incredibly important. And I think being a receptive collaborator is one of the best things that you can do in order to prepare yourself to really be able to take advantage of these opportunities when they come along. There's a concept right now in the Clinical and Translational Sciences consortium that I'm hearing a lot of, which is this concept of collaborative innovation. And it's one of those phrases that what the two words on their own mean, but when you start to put when you put them together, it's like, okay, how are they really thinking about this? And as I've been pondering this over the last few months to really understand what this is, I realize this is really where libraries have been for a very long time. So what you're looking at is, how is it that the whole is greater than the simple sum of its parts? And that's really what libraries are doing. They serve as that connector to bring different groups together and also participate in partnerships on campus. So, it's really about taking and making a collaboration be that much more effective, that much more efficient than it could have been with that organization on campus doing it on their own, and certainly the library just reaching out, but without an effective partner. So our library is, every library is unique and wonderful, but our library is unique in the context of the CTSAs in that right now, unless I'm mistaken, I believe we're the only library that is officially situated within our Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute. So it's an organizational relationship, and it has been fantastic. Because what we do is we act a bit administratively like a center in the CTSA, although we're a center that serves everybody. So we participate in translational science, or the CTSA, or NUCATS as we're called, the Northwestern University Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute. It's a mouthful, NUCATS. So we participate in NUCATS activities all of the time. We play a very active role. NUCATS itself is actually a great support for us. They provide infrastructure support for us so that we can get grant proposals out the door. They help us communicate our vision and communicate the cool things that our team is involved with. So we're able to amplify our voice and our impact on campus in ways that we wouldn't have been able to do so before. Additionally, so Dr. Lloyd Jones, who's shown there, is our director, and he He and Dr. Starin, who is the assistant director, have what they call a roadshow, and so they visit all of the departments and programs on campus, and Galter is sprinkled throughout. So it's a way of us getting the message out from an authoritative voice, so somebody who knows and understands the power of the library as a collaborator, and it's something that we couldn't do on our own. We just don't have that kind of an opportunity. So for everyone in the room, I'll go through a brief description of what translational science is, just so that everyone's on the same page. This really was inspired by the observation that it takes so long to move a discovery into practical implementation, on the order of decades. In 2006, a program was started at NIH to be able to help to basically pull together programming to more directly approach this particular problem. So how do we make science more effective? How do we make it more efficient? How do we get rid of the bureaucratic issues that tend to cause these things to stumble and take much longer to get into practice? And it's getting better, but it's still a challenge. So this is an image that I adapted from the Medical University of South Carolina's website, like a long time ago. In fact, it's so long that it doesn't exist on their website anymore. But I've updated it now so that there's this idea of these different translational points. And every time we talk about translation, I think because it's hard and it's very lots of moving parts, it's often described as a spectrum, and it feels very directional. So, but what it really is it's all sorts of things, arrows moving in and out and feeding all parts. So, I just want to make sure that this doesn't communicate that it's only one direction. It's far more complicated than that. So you can see these translational phases, the T0 through T4. There was a paper that was actually just published this month in the Journal of Clinical and Translational Science by Dr. Dan Fort, who's a postdoc in in health and biomedical informatics at Northwestern, and he actually collaborated with a couple of our librarians, Pamela Shaw and Karen Gutzman, on a systematic review of research papers to identify very specific areas of research. And this, I'm getting to how this is related to these T's here in a moment. But what they did was they found that they tried to better characterize what these T's are so that there's a common language to describe what's happening. And so, so this team found that T0 closes the research cycle back to T1. So that's the loop. So this is what we're really looking at as more of a circle. T1 is process from basic science to initial testing in humans. T2 is early phase clinical trials and time when effectiveness of interventions and establishment of clinical guidelines is determined. T3 is implementation and dissemination, and T4 is outcomes and effectiveness research. So there's a lot that's happening just in that single image. So just to be clear, this is a huge program. So right now there are 64 members of the Clinical and Translational Science Consortium. As you can see, they're spread all over the country. There are definitely activities that are happening on a regional level, and there are lots of interesting opportunities for collaboration, both at the local level and at the national level as well. So on that line, you may think, how do I learn more about this? Well, my favorite approach, is a Google search. I don't think I'm supposed to say that in this crowd, but I always think that that's like the pre-search to the real search. Like, what's out there, you know? And so I think one of the most important things that we can do is to look and see what resources are made available from the organization. So this is the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences. This is the institute that houses the Clinical and Translational Sciences program. And there is a lot of really great stuff here. It's a really good way to orient yourself on the priorities and the objectives of what they're trying to accomplish. This is Chris Austin. Dr. Austin is the director of NUCATS and has, I think, been a very valuable voice in helping to shepherd some of these programs forward. And I would recommend taking an opportunity to take a look at that as well. So going back to that collaboration being the special sauce, how do you find a partner? So, you know, it's easy to say, oh, you should reach out to your CTSA and see if they want to partner, but it's often not that easy. So I would recommend identifying those individuals who are on your campus, looking to see what kind of priorities they've established as goals for their funding period. Many people do not have CTSAs on their campus. In fact, most don't. So what I would do is go to the reporter database at NIH and look for other similar programs. We actually work with many centers. There are program awards, so P30, P50. There are other kinds of contractual agreements, U mechanism. So you can actually use Reporter to focus your search on your university and then see what people are doing. You know, that's kind of, I do that a lot just to get a better lay of the land. And when you do reach out, just know that everybody's busy and there are so many competing priorities and the funding situation doesn't help. And so just be persistent, be pleasantly persistent, keep it up, because there are real needs that these large organizations or these large grants have that I think libraries are particularly well suited to meet. One of the biggest pain points in CTSAs is reporting. So just trying to get a list of publications, it sounds so simple. It's a very tough nut to crack because what you're depending on is your investigators citing the award, the only way to kind of pull all of this together with an easy search. But the problem is, and this is I think, and we were talking about it earlier, this is the problem with science in general, is the relationships and the people and the getting people to do things a certain way. And so you need them to cite the grant, but then there's this kind of lack of awareness of what it means to benefit from the award and to realize, oh, I really should cite the grant there, you know, and so this is a great place for libraries to be. I think also there are a number of other opportunities in terms of data support services, which we had an opportunity to see some really great examples out in the hallway or in the foyer where we can see the way that people are approaching real needs on their campuses. I think that this is an especially exciting time for libraries because we're seeing how the library really is a welcoming space for these changes that we're seeing in the information and collaboration landscape. I mean, everything's very data-driven, but we still have these soft aspects of really getting work done. And so I think the library is a good place to be able to accomplish that. I think libraries are able to bring a great amount of expertise in terms of information. So, you know, metadata is actually, there's so many tough nuts to crack, but I think metadata is another opportunity and different kinds of strategies that we can employ in order to support discoverability. And then speaking of enhanced discoverability, I think that there is increasing expertise in our libraries around semantic web technologies, linked open data, different kinds of things like that, and those can all be brought to bear as well. So one way that we work with our CTSA is through evaluation. I lead evaluation and continuous improvement at NUCATS, and I've decided to take a very decidedly team-based approach to this because I feel evaluation shouldn't feel like it's being done to people. It should feel like a partnership, and the reason we do evaluation isn't to submit a report, it's to be able to have data to change and drive activities. You know, we want information to be able to drive the way we work. So the guiding principles, you know, open and collaborative. We look for really good data sources. We try and reuse data wherever we can. We pump it into dashboards. We push it into reports. We try and reuse operational approaches. We reuse surveys. We reuse so that there's very standard ways of looking at things so that we can get a better picture of how things are working. Interestingly, as much as I love the library in terms of its connecting and ability to pull people together, when it comes to data, I want as little human interaction as possible. So no human hands on the data. You know, what can we do in order to figure out those workflows? And so the stars on, this is what our ecosystem looks like in terms of data and process at NUCATS with the Evaluation and Continuous Improvement Program. And you can see the places where there are little orange stars are actually places where the library itself is plugging in. So we have expertise with research networking systems. We have a new repository which we're using to house both traditional and non-traditional research outputs. Our library is leading the enterprise level implementation of symplectic elements, which is a bibliographic data aggregator, which is really a wonderful tool, and we're very happy about it. We're applying the Becker model. So this is a collaboration that I had with Kathy Sarley at Becker Library when I was still there, who I miss very much. But I'm able to use this tool in our work at NUCATS, and we use that to really help us understand what those meaningful impacts of research are. As I mentioned, we're doing a lot of work with performance dashboards, and this work is being led by Keith Herzog in the evaluation, or on the evaluation team, and I'm just such a fan of the work he's doing because he's taking all of this data and turning it into meaningful information that allows you to do strategic management of process in the Institute. And then, and then we feed it all back in to make sure we're doing things appropriately. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but things seem to be working out all right. So I wanted to take a brief diversion, I guess, for a moment. In addition to doing these pretty standard kinds of operational things in NUCATS, we're also encouraged to do a little bit of discovery as well. And so we have a project both with the team at NUCATS as well as several of our librarians called the Informatics of Attribution, which is a project that we're collaborating on with the OHSU team and Melissa Handel. And it's really looking at trying to develop a model to better recognize the kinds of activities, roles, and outputs that people are creating, because the paper isn't the goal. Change in practice is the goal, or new ways of delivering training is the goal, or all of those sorts of things. But it's hard to help people drive toward that if there's no way to capture or recognize it. And I think we know this as well as anybody else. There are so many people in the academic research environment that make things go who are invisible to the traditional author list, right? And so how do we find them? How do we better credit what's going on? So you'll have to humor me. This is actually my favorite cartoon of all time. So what is success? How do we define it? Well, it kind of depends on how you're looking at it. You can have something, you can have an investigator who may not have, papers published in XYZ journal, or they may not have 1 million citations. What you really need is the right person to see your paper, or you may need to develop some sort of a tool or model that changes the way people do their work. So I think to have a better understanding of how we view success benefits everybody. So, and this goes without saying, but the problem is that credit extends far beyond the publication. It's difficult to tell what kind of work is being done and who's doing it. So you can see how connected everything is. You can have an award is given by an institute. It may be awarded to researcher C who creates an antibody, and maybe there's a gene ID that was determined by a mouse model from researcher B. Researcher B is not going to be credited on that paper. It's just a very complex network of contributions. And I think about that at NUCATS when I think about the translational workforce. Who is it that's powering things forward, right? And so it's the research coordinators, who are getting people enrolled in trials, and so many people are not showing up on publications. But I would argue not only should they be credited for this work, but it's in the institution's best interest to understand who's good at what, so that you can put together better teams that are more efficient and more able to plug in at a much higher level. I mean, when things work better, they work better for everybody. So Melissa's team and our team have tried to think about this in a very computational way. And we think that having a model to better be able to attribute these kinds of activities that can be integrated into information systems is one way to do that. As with most successful approaches, we also are taking a page out of other successful approach books and seeing collaborative approach is important. So I'm getting input from stakeholders. We want to build on the credit taxonomy that's been integrated into journals for submission, looking at contributor roles. I think it's a really wonderful framework, and we've been happy to collaborate with that team and learn from their work as well. Build the models and then evaluate the models in real systems with real data. There are obviously a lot of things that are needed in order to make this work. Research is a very complicated space, and so being able to tease apart the different kinds of things that are happening in terms of not only just roles, but what is it that people are creating, and to have a model that is dynamic enough that you can evolve with that changing research landscape is really important. So how do we do that? And that's the question. We're working on it, and certainly welcome interested people to get involved, because this is our thing that we really feel is important, because it'll serve a great need, I think, in terms of better attributing the work that people do, and I think it will also help to push things forward as well. So this is actually a diagram of what our initial work looks like. This is a contribution role ontology. And this can be found in, there's a GitHub group called OpenRIF. This is the Open Research Information Framework ontology. This work was done by the OpenRIF collaborative group, as well as the Force 11 attribution working group. And you can see there are things that are very common, like author roles. So what are author roles? Editing and proofreading, figure development, translating, writing the original draft. But then there are things that are maybe a little different. So having a role as far as the information technology, like with hardware or software systems, or maybe protocol or guideline development as part of the methodology. So you can see we're trying to better represent this. This is an initial first approach, and we're excited to be able to refine it. So we're not the only folks thinking about this. There are a lot of people who are trying to figure this out. There was recently a collaborative work group that was sponsored through NISO and funded by the Sloan Foundation looking at alternative assessment metrics. And we had an opportunity to work on one of those groups. We worked on the output types and persistent identifiers group. Mike Taylor was a co-chair for that. And we released outputs for public comment, and those outputs, so those things that people are creating, will also serve as kind of a springboard to be able to take that work forward. You can see here I don't know what to call these. So for just ease of understanding, I'm calling them superclasses. So superclasses of output types. This is a very collaborative effort. So we're looking at things like gray literature, but really some of these could all be gray literature, right? It's that classification has been a little challenging. Something that reflects the basic sciences, data, images, diagrams, and video, methodologies, and so on. So you can see there's quite a few different things here that we can all agree we may want to get credit for. There's also some really great work with the Acumen team in Europe, looking at academic careers, and then a number of different research impact frameworks as well. So why? I think we all understand, I've talked about some of these different things. Obviously, the work environment is changing. We have more data now. So this is, you guys, the world is our oyster. There's so much data, there's really great systems. We just need to plug in and help to shepherd some of this activity to a point where we can begin to make more use out of it. We have more recognition that these diverse research output types and activities are important. There's this idea of the 4 A's of research. So we need to be able to analyze, we want to be accountable, we need to be able to advocate for our work and for future funding, and we also need to help drive those kinds of funding decisions. So that can help toward that. Information systems, again, on the whole world is your oyster comment, there's some really amazing advancements that are being made from a technical perspective as well. I think this also helps us better connect with our stakeholders, either whether it's the public or whether it's our colleagues, because it helps to bring the conversation to kind of practical everyday activities. And then certainly there's an increasing recognition of the value of team science. So what are we trying to do? Well, we're just like everybody else. We're just trying to do the best job we can. And the way that we approach that is really guided by the priorities on our campus. So what I'm going to show you are things that are working or that are priorities at Northwestern, but I would challenge you to take a look at the things that are happening on your campus because it's a much easier way to plug in. So we're seeing, there are lots of these diagrams, the research life cycle, right? So what I like about this one is the loop for reuse. But what I think all of these different research life cycles do is they give us a framework on which we can begin to imagine the library. I think there's also an increased understanding of the value of open science practices in terms of engagement, empowerment, data access and usability, and so on. And so there are a number of, that's another good way to kind of drive that conversation. And those are things that are important on our campus. In terms of thinking about, thinking about what these opportunity areas might be, at least from my perspective, I'm seeing some very specific things. So scholarly communications, always. People need to be able to communicate what they're doing. Rigor and reproducibility has been an increasingly important area on campus. Just being able to support research, and then also we have a number of big data activities on campus, so we know we need to be able to at least speak to those in some way. We've got clinical initiatives, like, of course, we're supporting evidence-based care in the clinic, but also the integration of clinical informatics and how does the library fit into that. There's that open science column. And then evaluation and business intelligence. And here are our challenges. I don't know if these are challenges that you guys are familiar with. So, we just try and look for, what's the sweet spot? So, where is there a pillar of activity where the challenges are smaller than they might be somewhere else? So that's not, I know that's not a very visionary approach, but that's really the way that I try and think about these things. These are the activities that we're doing. So education and curricular support, we actually defer to you all. There are some really great activities happening in terms of support of education activities on campus, in terms of materials and tutorials and things, and we do what we can. We bring in a lot of outside training, but we are, our team is getting bigger and more specialized. So we're going to be able to do some additional things there too. We're also getting ready to do a massive renovation, and so that will help us support our education support services. Clinical support, as I mentioned, we are in the clinical environment. We've been very fortunate to have a number of fans in that area. Jonna Peterson is our senior clinical informationist and launched the program a little over a year ago. And we've also had a second person join the team, and they're just knocking it out of the park. I'm really amazed. Research support. So for those of you who know Pam Shaw, you know that she has, she's just, I've called her the Swiss Army knife of librarians before. She's just good at everything. But, she really has made a name for herself in terms of support of research activities. That is everything from, supporting specific topic areas to being able to support issues around compliance and so on, which is in the next area. We're also doing a lot of systematic reviews. Last year we published or worked in other ways on, I think, 35 different projects. We've done a lot of cross trainings. We've got 2 librarians who are probably most seasoned at this, and then we try and do cross training so that everybody can pitch in, because you know how this goes. You agree to do something, and then 3 more amazing opportunities come in at the same time. So we really need to work together to support each other. We launched Metrics and Impact Core in the library shortly after I arrived, to be able to better target those kinds of services in the library. And you can see some of the things that we're doing here in terms of biosketch buffing. We do a lot of heavy-duty bibliometric and scientometric analysis. We support all of the program review activities on the Feinberg School of Medicine campus in terms of data to help to drive those. And we work really closely with the departments, too, to help them understand what those data might be able to unveil. And so on. And then we're doing a number of different digital initiatives. So we launched a repository. Our repository has been customized so that it can house data sets. It also produces machine-readable metadata. So all of that, it really goes toward that, that mantra of discoverability. We can't force people to go to our tool and do the search, because everyone's going to Google. So what we need to do is think about how do they do the search in Google so that our stuff pops up first. And so that's really has helped to drive a lot of what we're doing. As I mentioned, we're doing the symplectic elements implementation. Violetta Elick in our team is also leading she's the project manager for the enterprise ORCID implementation as well. And then we're trying to do some very targeted things for discoverability on our website in terms of smarter searching, so Elasticsearch or Solar. And we're launching a new website I think next week maybe, something like that. So I'm very excited about that. So just to talk a little bit about our metrics and impact core. This work is really led by Karen Gutzman, who's the Impact and Evaluation Librarian, and we'll be hiring another person very shortly. We really help to support people on publishing strategies, tracking publications, helping them with their online identity, and so on. And we use a number of different tools that you all are using as well. We really try and, wring the goodness out of all of these terrific resources we're spending, millions of dollars on. Let's really harness those and put them to work for us too. They're for everybody, us too. So we're really excited about that. So Karen's pulled together some really interesting and meaningful services, and I'll highlight those in some of the next slides. So she's doing the kind of four, the image that's divided into four is a research impact of a study of policy documents. And where those citations were found online. We will often characterize outputs in terms of open access. We provide monthly high impact factor research results to the campus to publish on their website. And we also do publication reports for grant applications. Although sometimes I'll be honest, sometimes that is, for the amount of time and energy it takes, it does not feel like maybe the best fit always. So we tend to be a little choosy about which one of those the ones that we do. So if your grant is due in a week and a half, it's probably not going to be a great partnership, so, those kinds of things. But if people let us know ahead of time, we're happy to do what we can to help them knock it out of the park. We do publication summaries. So as I mentioned, we do data for this program review on campus. This is a screenshot kind of representation of what that report might look like. There is a data table that everyone receives that it's just an Excel data table, and there are dozens of pages. All of the methodology has been very carefully captured, and anyone can reproduce that work because we want to make sure that people know when they get it that they can trust it. And this is actually a really fun thing. So the Northwestern University Quarterly Bulletin was indexed in PubMed that first year, so it would have been 2014, 2015. And this is our local journal. It was a digitization project that was done over many years. The journal has not been in existence for many years. And so it's really hard to get people excited about a journal that was published decades ago, right? We're excited because it's an awesome project and now it's available in PubMed. And so what we did was a citation analysis of our top 5, or we did a citation analysis of everything that was published in the journal just to see what the impact of these articles are. And even today, these articles are being cited and used so that it just goes to show that your impact is very lasting. We do a number of visualizations to help people communicate what's, what they're doing in terms of area of work. This is one of my favorite things that I like to do for people because it's like the perfect visualization. So this is a global map where so it's Northwestern. If you're wondering why everything is purple, I work at Northwestern. So the intensity of the purple color is directly related to the number of citing authors from that country. So I took all of the publications from Northwestern, or from Feinberg School of Medicine, from 2012 to 2016, as it says there's about 19,000 of them, and then we looked for those first generation citations. You can use this as a proxy of dissemination. Like, who even found your work? Well, if they live in that country and they're citing it, I think that's a pretty good proxy indicator. We also did, there's a tool that we've been using to do, it performs natural language processing across the corpus of literature, just the titles and the abstracts, and then clusters topics together. And interestingly, so we did this with the mesh heading in PubMed. So as you know, there was a new mesh heading in, I think it was 2012, about translational medical research. And interestingly, it actually separates itself out into two clusters. One is on actual like engagement and kind of working with people, and the other one is really heavy duty and policy, and the other one is really heavy duty basic research, which I thought was kind of interesting. And this is an image that we did that helps us look, using the same software actually, looking at research concepts. So we took those 19,000 papers and then looked for clusters in the data at our school, just to see what are these main high points. This is really an interesting approach too, because you can create a gradient to look at the data over time. So you can see what are emerging concepts in terms of what are more recent concepts. And you can also look at an indicator of impact by citation numbers. So you can see which one of those concepts are more highly cited. So if you see something that's getting tons of relative citations and seems to be a hot and emerging area, it might be a useful thing to know. I mentioned our repository. We've been very excited. The campus has been enthusiastic and very supportive of this. I have to admit, I was bracing myself for rolling out an institutional repository. But it's been really great because I think people understand that there's got to be a place to put this stuff. And they realize they're creating lots of stuff and they want to get credit for it. And so what we've done is everything that goes into Digital Hub, you can manage the permissions, everything gets a DOI, we provide metrics so you can see who's looking at the stuff, who's downloading the stuff, those kinds of things, which has been really helpful. We've also tried to have this be flexible so that it can be a place for everybody. So this is a great example. This is StatTag. This is a tool that was developed by Leah Welty and Luke Rasmussen at Northwestern. It's a statistical tool that basically you do the analysis in Stata or R or SAS, and because this software allows you to take that calculation and embed it in the document, if you have to go back and redo the calculation, it propagates the change into the Word document so that you don't lose track of anything. Everything updates, and you also are able to look in the Word document and see the methodology that was used. Because I don't know about you all, but I've got so many spreadsheets and little notes and things everywhere, so this way everything's all in the document and you can go back and find it. We're thinking a lot about supporting computational issues. We have a cluster of computing resources. We've got 6 high-powered, well, they were high-powered. It's been 2 years, so they're not so high-powered anymore. But computers to be able to support some of this stuff. We're trying to do more work to support different kinds of training. We do a ton of grant and publication support, and then obviously the digital projects as well. On the horizon, so at least this week or last week, this is these are the things we're thinking about. We're hosting a scientific writing and publishing retreat this summer just to help people with really practical things about writing. This seems to be a need area that I think we can address, and Patty Smith, who's a new librarian on our team, I think is really well suited to be able to do this, and we're excited about that. We're going to be cranking out a research dissemination guide and then enhancing our support services for centers and institutes with a curriculum for centers, a center curriculum. So how do they plug in and amp up their ability to address all of these moving parts? So we're excited about that. We've got a bibliometrics and scientometrics course that we're co-hosting with Leiden University this summer in Chicago, and it sold out actually very quickly. So we'll probably try and arrange something for this fall as well. It's a terrific course. It's so good. Both Karen Gutzman and I took it in 2014, and it was money and time well spent. We're launching a brand new research data core. We just hired a data scientist who is amazing, and I'm hopeful that he'll also be patient because I think all of the stuff he's doing is cool, and I'm looking forward to learning about it. But I'm starting to enter into the old dog and new tricks realm, so good luck to him with that. Doing more around data management, which I'm really speaking to the experts in this room because you all are much further ahead than we are. So it really goes back into communicating this stuff out to people. But when you think about how you're trying to set this up for everybody else, set this up for your own library, how do you do this? Well, I guess borrowing from the Beatles, you can look to the things that other libraries are doing. So this article, I was fortunate to collaborate with several library-based folks I think it was published in 2013 or 14. Where we looked at what cool things are other libraries doing. And we tried to organize it at the time by the key function committees in the CTSAs. Now, the CTSAs have undergone a little bit of reshuffling in terms of structure, but there's still really great ideas there. And I'm very happy to take those ideas that other people have already thought about and tested and see, how can I apply that in my own setting? There's the Translating Expertise book, which was edited by Marisa Conti from Michigan. It covers basic and clinical science, education and community engagement, networks and connections, infrastructure, and evaluation. So you can see there are a number of different topics there. We have, I think, some real opportunities in terms of how we think about our work and how we think about addressing needs on campus, and these are the voices from our colleagues. And we've got Lisa Palmer and Sally Gore are authors of one of the chapters in the book, so which is, I think, a real, the work with the repository here has been a terrific, really terrific contribution to the field. So I would encourage you to take a look there. We have a new director of the National Library of Medicine. That doesn't happen very often. So Dr. Brennan recently assumed the helm. As you know from listservs, I'm sure, and other things, there's strategic planning going on at the National Library of Medicine. This is, I can say, by far the most engaged and purposeful planning process I've observed. Everything is very well thought out, and they are actively seeking input from the community. So I strongly encourage you to plug into that process, read about what's happening. Dr. Brennan has a terrific blog. Every time I read it, I wonder how she has time to write such thoughtful posts, and because I'm sure that she's far busier than I am. So I'll try and be inspired by it and not feel guilty. And in JMLA this month, there's an invited editorial from Dr. Brennan where she talks about the 3rd century of the National Library of Medicine. I cannot more strongly encourage you to go read that paper. It's really wonderful, it's inspiring, it's exciting to think about the vision of where information and informatics and data all come together and really find a nice home in libraries. So, just to close, I had a couple of thoughts that I thought might be useful. Just more of a way to encourage you to think about approaching this. If you want to get started in these areas, it feels like a heavy lift because there's so much happening and it's all very complicated and it's all moving very quickly. But I think by pulling some of these ideas out and approaching it in a methodical manner, it's a little more doable, or you can think about it a little more purposefully. So, think about what's going on campus. Who seems like a really good partner? Pay attention to what's going on. There are some global and national issues happening around biomedical research these days. I don't know if you guys had realized that. So, that's something to keep in mind. Think about what kind of pain that might cause for your campus. Are these, always be thinking about these things. How can we respond to it? And should we? Because not everything is, just because you can respond to it doesn't mean that it's a good idea for your organization. Like the library organization, you don't want to, get too many things going that require a lot of time and very little payback. What's missing? What's needed? What can you do just today? What can you do later this year? Are there things that you can do with the resources and people that you have in hand, or are these areas where you may want to have strategic growth? Communicate what you're doing. It's been a really interesting process being at NUCATS, because when I joined and I started going to the meetings, and I would say, the library does that. The library does that. Do you want us to, we can help you with that? Do you want us to help you set up these kinds of things? Everybody's like, so when we started thinking about, getting ready, we're going to be writing our next renewal. It feels crazy to say that out loud, but we're starting to think about our next renewal, and there was, a really interesting kind of high-level topic, and they were like, we should see what the library is doing here. And I was like, that's awesome, so that's been great. So just, keep at it. That idea of collaborative innovation and the role that the library can play to help to catalyze that, I think, is an important one. And also, don't put it off. So it's so easy to say, well, as soon as we, get approval for this new position, we'll be able to do it. Or as soon as we get our budget set for next year, we can see if this is possible. What can you do with now? And it's an easy conversation to have in terms of just thinking about the possibilities. So I will close there and then open the floor for questions if anyone has any. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sophie Howe from the National Center for Atmospheric Research.
Hi.
Hi, and I have a question about the attribution framework that you're working on.
Right.
I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what aspects of credit that you found useful for you, and how are you partnering with them to develop this attribution, and how is it going to be implemented through your workflow so that it will be easy for your researchers to, one, know what the definitions are for the roles that they're choosing from, and how are they going to verify these roles that they're assigning to each other or maybe to themselves?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, and I mean, definitely one, I think maybe also to get into the nitty gritty, or maybe over lunch or something, but I will say, and this might be useful, this was more of a philosophical, like, hey, we should do this kind of an approach, and we could all see the value in it. And we were thinking like, and this will be something that information systems will implement. It's like that kind of an approach. But I was filling out my annual report for the Department of Preventive Medicine, and they ask for your critical references, 5 critical references and the role that you played on them since you joined the organization. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can use the ontology for this. And I called Melissa at home, this was on the weekend, and I was like, oh my gosh, this framework isn't for some generic information system. This is for the faculty members, and this is for the people who are creating these things. It's to think about how all these different roles that we're playing on outputs. So I do think it's, it's kind of a mix between better recognizing what stuff people are creating and then what roles they're playing. And then trying to connect to those things together. But I think that this is really important to be able to find that longitudinal impact. What's the real, what's the real influence of that work on change in practice or whatever. I don't know if that answers it. It's, there's also going to be like a lot of luck, some hard work, and then trying to get a number of stakeholders involved as well, which we've been fortunate to do with many of them, but that's, it's with any of these issues, it's the people that really make the difference.
I'm Michelle Bass from Stanford's Lane Medical Library. I have 2 questions. One is, could you speak a little bit about the dynamics of your staff in terms of librarians versus data scientists? And they can be the same thing, but I know a little bit about your background, so if you can talk a little bit about that. Sure. And secondly when did Galter move officially under NUCATS? Is that a recent kind of change? Sure.
So great. That is good perspective to have. So that happened as they started writing my position announcement. They wanted to have a new vision. And so all of this kind of happened at that time. I wasn't this was, I heard about it just the same as you all did. I was like, that's interesting. And then I applied for the job and I was like, oh, this really works. This is great. But it's been really useful. In terms of our staff composition, we've actually hired half of the people who work at Galter are new since I got there in 2014. And interestingly enough, I have hired my first non-librarian this month. So everybody else has been a specialist librarian or something else, someone with a librarian background, either to be a research librarian to more generally support or specific sorts of things like impact and evaluation and so on. The data scientist that we hired he's really great. He's got a lot of expertise in terms of teaching and course development. He is well versed in a number of scripting languages and is very comfortable at the command line. So he'll be able to, really plug in on analysis types of activities. He also is adept with different kinds of data. So he's generated and used basic science data, clinical data, and has done some really interesting visualizations. And he's a power user in our enterprise data warehouse, which is really helpful, which I thought I would do, when you join it's like, I should do that. That sounds really good. It's very complicated. So I was like, I can't do that.
Lisa Palmer, UMass Medical School. Hi, Kristi. I'm particularly interested in the Enterprise Orchid project that you mentioned. Can you talk about what your approach will be? Will you be working in a trusted capacity and registering ORCIDs for researchers, things like that?
Hi, yeah, so we're in the process of, really trying to determine what that, what that workflow will precisely look like. The Northwestern ORCID project is a really great collaboration across our 2 campuses and with lots of different stakeholders. So it's been really good to get to hear, straight from the horse's mouth in terms of how the systems work and how we might be able to tie things together. I think as far as how we will do that, I've heard there are challenges with every approach. So I don't want to speak, erroneously in terms of the specific approach, but I will put you in touch with Violetta, who can, I think we have very specific opinions about what we'd like to see happen, for sure. I'm sorry, that's such a non-answer.
Hi, I'm Dave Huron from Johns Hopkins University. I was curious to hear a little bit more about what you started with around business intelligence and actual project evaluation. Mm-hmm. That seems like, I never heard a library getting into that area, and it sounds a lot of scope for a lot of libraries, but it seems like an interesting pathway out of, like, let's say, scholarly communications into something that has certain groups might be more interested mm-hmm. in that particular area, and I was wondering if you could say more about how that's working, how it's scoped.
Sure. I think that's a great observation. It really is driven out of the scholarly communications world, and it's, I think it really leverages the fact that publication databases, for all of their weaknesses, are really terrific sources of information, and there's a really strong established community around analyzing publication analysis. And when you look at layering other types of data and workflows and indicators on top of that, they can be used to help, with strategic management of strategic decision making. We licensed the Insights tool from Clarivate recently, and I'm very pleased that we have. So it's been another tool. I didn't talk about it during the, during the talk, but what it's done is it's allowed us to be able to look at, or to be able to more easily find those indicators that people are interested in, because it all boils down to that idea of strategic management. I think there's only so many resources on campus, and people who make decisions want to make sure they're making the right ones in terms of looking at opportunities for growth. We've been able to take a look at aggregate data and say, wow, this isn't a really active area of research, but normalized citation rates for the stuff that's coming out of our campus is just off the charts. What they do with that is their decision, so that may indicate something where they could make an investment, maybe grow the program, maybe look at tying together 2 related programs or areas of work. I think it's also important to note we don't do this at the department level. So we're doing this in terms of so Thomson Reuters or Clarivate has, these research areas. So there are like 200 and some research areas. There's a GIP classification of clinical, preclinical, and health topic areas. There's set like 74 or 75 of them. And what it does is it allows you to look at something like obstetrics and gynecology, but not the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And that's important for 2 reasons. One, we're just looking at that topic on campus, which gives us an opportunity to look across departments. And secondly, we don't have to deal with individual people, because when you do those individual searches, you basically have to tie everything together, and then the search is good for like 20 minutes, and then something doesn't work again. So, looking at it on a topic-based level actually makes that conversation, it goes back to the evaluation and continuous improvement, like vibe that we like, which is team-based and very engaged. Same thing, that's why we use the topic areas. We want people to feel like we're giving them information that's helpful and that they aren't having it done to them.
One final question. Erica Sevitson, Brown University. Hi, Kristi. So you talked a lot about some of the amazing things your group is doing and how you look for ideas, or how we can look for ideas. Can you talk about how you go about fostering the culture of sort of innovation and exploration and collaboration?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've tried to be really purposeful about that. So the way, I didn't show you a normal org chart, but the way that our library is structured, we have 3 departments. There's user services, research and information services, and then we have systems and collection services that we've actually merged. And I did that specifically because I wanted the people who get the stuff and the people who get the stuff out to work together more closely, because it's like I think there's a lot of pain points that happen because people don't know each other, for lack of a better way of describing it. I try very hard not to push too hard so that everybody has time to think and read the literature and just think about the people they're working with. Like take that time and think big thoughts and like let your brain kind of shut down a little bit, because you can't think of new things when all you're doing is like answering emails like a maniac, right? So, and the other thing that we've done is, so I mentioned the departments. The departments are only there to get work done. So like I have time cards, vacation requests, regular meetings, like annual review, that kind of thing. But all of the work in Galter happens in cross-department work groups that are topic-based. And so I make sure that there's somebody from every group on every work team. So that, because user services, they're the people who are dealing with the people in our library all the time. If we don't hear what they're saying, we'll spend a lot of time rolling out programs that don't make sense for the way people work. So, I don't know that there's anything necessarily super surprising, but it's just, just trying to make sure that people feel supported. I also very clearly communicate that I expect that everybody, expect that we're a team, that we pitch in and work with each other, that we engage personally, and and don't, like, I'm not a big fan of like letting things stew. So I like to have an open culture, and I expect that everybody pitches in when those crazy projects, when you get a bunch of stuff all at once. I mean, I've done literature searches and publication tables, and sometimes that's just the way it goes. So, yep. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristi.
Thanks.